Hello and welcome to the Inner Sense channel. Today we have a guest that I'm very excited about, Leonardo Muller, who is a postgraduate researcher at the Cambridge Institute for Music Therapy Research, which is part of Anglia Ruskin University. So we're going to talk about, hopefully we're going to talk about Leonardo's work on the properties of music and a property called groove, which I'm really excited to find out more about, and hopefully hear a little bit about Leonardo's interesting background. So morning and welcome, Leonardo.
Good morning, Ian. I'm very happy to be here in the Inner Sense channel. I was happy to have a conversation with you a few weeks ago on my podcast. Very interesting about your work, inflammation and in the Inner Sense.
Yes, yeah, it seems like we've both got an interest in kind of health and well-being. And I'll share a link to your channel on the notes for this video as well, because you've had
Sounds
some
great.
really interesting guests on your channel too.
Yes,
so could we
thank you.
start? Could we just start by hearing a little bit about your personal journey? So I know that you've worked as a composer and you still are a composer, and your family are musicians as well. So yeah, tell me please, how did you come to be so involved in music and studying it from a neuroscientific perspective?
Great. Well, yeah, that's the main thing I would say, is that I was born in a musician's family. My mom is a concert pianist from Venezuela. She plays classical music from Latin America, and as well, the great classics, European classics. And my dad is a music teacher at the high school I went to, and it was also a primary school in South Kensington, a French school there. And he was my music teacher for 5 or 6 years. So in that environment, I was naturally brought to study music. When I was young, I went to music schools, a music school where I was learning cello and piano, but I didn't continue that and into my teenage years. The most significant year for me in terms of music was when I was 15. That year, I asked my dad to get me an electric bass, get some lessons. I was playing with a music composition software to make electronic music, and I started a band with my high school friends. We were making music together and a few covers. So that's really the time that it really pushed me, and I think really making music on the computer is what made me realize I want to pursue this into a university bachelor's degree, and that's how I got deeper into music production. Now, how did I transition into neuroscience? Well, it was because there was for my dissertation of the music production course, to write something, and my main question was, well, what are emotions? Because with music we're always trying to evoke emotions. If that's the main thing, what is it? And I didn't realize it would be kind of complex at the time, and dive me straight into existentialism, philosophy, then psychology, and there was a bit of spirituality in the same time. And eventually I read neuroscience and got into a master's, and now I'm here studying my second year in PhD at the Cambridge Institute for Music Therapy Research after 2 years of research assistant jobs. Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, going back to that time when you were 15, I think that sort of age, the teenage years, are so powerful for many teenagers. There's so many changes happening, and so many shifts and transitions. So at that time you started a band and you were working with starting to use synthesizers and electronic equipment to make music. Can you recall what, if we're talking about emotion, what kind of, was it all excitement, or were there any other feelings that you can recall from that time?
That's a great question. Great question. So with my friends, we had this band for the last 3 years of my high school, and anytime we had a moment, we would run to the music school, my music classroom, and just play something, or we would prepare every year for the talent show, for instance, or there were other concerts opportunities we would try, and we would jam a lot. So it was a lot of I don't know, blues stuff mainly, let's say, or we had a set of chords and we would improvise on top. But there was a lot of high energy moments, sometimes very experimental stuff it was just, playing around with instruments and the percussion or whatever. But the way I described it was a psychedelic rock band. That's what we do, or funk band as well. Um, yeah, we did our own psychedelic song, sort of 7-minute song, and then there was a hip hop funk song we did. Um, we were rapping as well as playing our instruments. It was fun. It was good times.
So lots of different types of music, maybe lots of different emotions as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, difficult to pinpoint
And
one.
yeah, um, I want to talk about some of the kind of technical aspects of your research on
Mm,
a quality of music that your is referred to as groove in your field of work. But first of all, just a more of a philosophical sort of point or a question or a question of your opinion, really. Going back to this sort of relationship between music and emotion,
mhm.
is there a direction you would say that does music stir up emotion more, or do we have to have the emotion sort of ready and waiting to be activated by the music? Maybe it could be both
Mm,
ways. What are your thoughts
yeah,
on that?
definitely goes both ways, but there is there's a stronger emotional response with favorite music. That's what the literature is saying, meaning that you've already have this emotional tendency, not only a link to the music, you've developed a familiarity that you with that song that you find that you favorite with, but also I would suppose that it's a habitual emotional state that you are trying to reach with that music. That would be in addition to the link to that specific, there's like two emotions there, I would say.
Right. There's a habitual emotional state that you use the word try to reach through the
Mm.
music. Okay, so
To elicit with the music, and
to
then
elicit.
there's probably the craving aspect of that song. Maybe we can describe it like that.
Hmm. So I
But this
guess
is philosophical. I can't cite anything so far.
no,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking about sort of we often hear types of music being described as that's a cheerful song, or that song is quite melancholic.
Mhm.
Um, so it sort of suggests that everybody who listens to that music would feel the same thing.
Mm.
However, just thinking about it kind of logically, I guess people, as you say, people can start to associate favorite songs or even songs that they dislike with another experience that was happening at a time, maybe a happy experience or a difficult time of their life. So it could, you know, yeah.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. I mean, I can touch on that. So I've helped on this Radio Me project, which is a favorite music for dementia, so for people with dementia. And
mhm,
an important thing there was it was a large group study. We were many universities on the group, but one of the things we were trying to map out was the autobiographical associations with the music, so that you can develop a richer understanding of what is the association with the music of that person who has dementia, but also sometimes to identify certain personal associations that are too much for the person, because the goal was to find a very meaningful playlist for someone who has dementia. And so sometimes some participants would be okay with crying with certain songs. Some of them were like, no, this is too much. I don't want to listen to this. But then, externally, you might say, oh, that's a cheerful song, though. It is it's Michael Jackson. I like it, it's a cool song. But they had some sort of association, personal association. Um, I can touch on a more murderous association that my supervisor told me at some point.
Oh,
I can
oh
open
yeah.
it.
Why not now? The murderous
Yeah,
association. What was
sure.
that?
Well, my supervisor told me that someone once called him and he said, "Oh, are you Professor York Wagner?" Yes. Okay. I'm calling you from prison. Okay. I just want to talk to you why I'm here and why I did what I did. And it turns out that this man was on his couch watching a music video of Elvis Presley, and uh, his wife was entering, coming back home, closed the door, and Elvis Presley sang something like "Just Do It." I don't remember which exactly song, and he took that as a message to murder his wife, which is this is an extreme example of where its meaning is very individual. Well, yeah.
And do you know that person? Did they have? Were they diagnosed with any condition?
I
Either
I don't know
before
much
or
more,
after?
but I would suppose they would have some sort of potential diagnosis, yeah. Or maybe you're better to
Well, no, I'm
say
just
this.
just wondering
Yeah,
because yeah,
yeah,
wow, and even maybe some cognitive decline, dementia or Alzheimer's could
yeah,
completely change someone's response to powerful music and
yeah,
suggestions of music.
yeah.
Wow.
So it's a very powerful murderous one, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Um, Before we move on to defining groove, which I really, really want to get onto,
Sure.
um, a couple of other things about what you've said. Or when we last spoke, we talked about archetypes.
Hmm.
So um, now I feel like we've got this idea that some music, most people would say, "Oh, that's a cheerful, upbeat piece."
Hmm.
But we've also just said that people can have a personal association with maybe a completely an emotion that's very different than cheerful. It might be stressful or
Hmm.
uh, murderous, even. So, do you feel that there are some patterns in music that could be considered archetypal? Um, do they cross kind of cultural boundaries, and are there patterns in
Hmm.
music, rhythms, which if wherever you go in the world, people will most people will have a similar reaction to, emotional reaction to?
That's a fantastic question. I'm curious to understand a bit more the association between archetypes and music. Um, I'll send you a video afterwards of a mathematician who just was doing association between mathematical concepts and archetypes. He says that he believes that it is any image that is conjured when a certain mathematical concept is communicated is actually eliciting an archetype, and meaning that it's because mathematical concepts are not observable. He suggested this is a possible psychological mechanism, which is a sort of collective unconscious, really ingrained uh, mathematical perception that all
Mm,
humans have, and that mathematicians develop, their
mhm,
intuition in that. So
mm,
now coming down to music, um, I know that there is music therapy that's based on Jungian therapy. I don't know to what extent archetypes have been mapped out there, but I can think of two types of research. Sorry, so there is guided imagery with music, which is a music therapy that's inspired by Jungian psychology, which is in essence you listen to music, and or at least the conventional one. Maybe each music therapist does it in a more specific way, or there are different methods. But the one I know is that you relax your body lying down. Maybe close your eyes, but you listen to music. You have a therapist, music therapist with you, and you just let whatever images that the music elicits, you communicate it at the end, or maybe you draw about it, And there was a paper by some colleague at CIMTR who, Annie Heiderscheit, she mapped out in eating disorders, people who have eating disorders who are doing music therapy, she mapped out the hero's journey in the music therapy sessions. So in the several music therapy sessions, in the way that the people would describe their feelings about the therapy session. And yeah, she managed to say, well, there's a hero's journey where I think the essence is that you have a sort of starting point you want to work on, then there's some challenges, and then there's some overcoming. I think that's the simple version, but there's several steps of that hero's journey. And maybe that's one archetype. Maybe that's I'm not sure if that's one of them. Yeah, but I think that could be mapped out to that.
The name of that researcher, Mary, someone was it? Did you say?
Annie Heiderscheit.
Annie Heiderscheit.
I'll write it down. She's the director at CIMTR. Very nice lady. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. That sounds, it's reminded me of kind of shamanic journeying as well. Sometimes that's done with drumming, and then there's often an intention is set before the session. I'm not sure if that's done in this case.
Possibly,
but yeah,
probably
the aspect of the drumming rhythm, and then going on a journey and receiving it, or letting images emerge, and then discussing it with someone after, like processing it afterwards, in this case with a therapist. It seems like there's parallels with shamanic journeying as well.
Definitely,
which is
yeah.
Interesting that if they, like, I don't know if this therapy was done with that was developed with that in mind, or if they've evolved kind of separately. But
I think the history of guided imagery with music was Helen Bonnet, I think, and I think she was doing it with LSD initially. So that's the way it started. Bonnie methods, yeah.
Maybe there's some thought that shamans were using, mushrooms or something very early on. Fascinating. Okay, let's get on to groove. So in common sort of layman's terms, and in everyday conversations about music, then we might say that music has got good groove or groovy. It sort of defines the feel-good aspect of music and dance. But from a neuroscientific perspective, can you break down what groove means to you and for the people in your field researching music?
Sure. So since I've done this research, I now use the word groovy more. So that's something. And but I do mean this aspect that I'm gonna say now, which groove is defined as a pleasurable urge to move the body to the rhythm of the music. And it's in terms of computational definitions, which maps onto neuroscientific definitions, is an optimal balance between predictable rhythms and complex rhythms. In music theory wordings or terms, this is a moderate amount of syncopation. Syncopation is rhythm complexity in essence. So yes,
okay,
and
so
then
I just pause there
sure.
a moment. So balance between predictability and complexity. So can we think of it? Can you give an example in the music that people who aren't musicians would understand about what is something predictable and
Sure.
what is a type of aspect of music that's complex?
Sure. So the simplest, most predictable rhythm would be, I'm not sure if you hear my clapping. No, maybe
No.
I'll just sing it. So if we're doing a 4-beat music, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's say, yeah, I'll just, the most predictable is 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's simple rhythms. A more complex and groovy rhythm would be to have that 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're mm, do, 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 do. I'm going in between
Oh,
the 1, 2, 3, 4, do, 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 do. It's a bit more complex than 1, 2, 3, 4. Did you hear me there, or I
yes,
was?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I
good, good,
did.
good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Good.
Okay, so yeah, it's adding some irregularity to
Exactly.
the beat. And what would be, maybe this is a tricky question, but I know you don't have to sing it, but can you think of a type of music that's got, it's kind of not groovy because it's so complex? I don't
Yeah.
know, like some Beethoven symphony or something like that, but it's,
Right. Yeah.
or maybe that is groovy, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you can find moments of groove in some Beethoven moments, but I think the best way of I'll try and sing it. It will be something like. Sorry, you have. I have to give you the 1 to 4 first. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Something like that.
Ah,
Imagine that. How can you
so it's
dance to that? That's difficult.
hard,
Yeah,
hard to find the pattern, hard to
exactly.
find the
Yeah,
groove.
exactly. Hard to find the group. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Um, so okay, so it's this balance between predictability and complexity, and I can understand now how that can be interpreted sort of mathematically and in neuroscience. Um, why why do you think that feels so compelling for people, for humans or maybe animals as well? Why is that balance so appealing?
That's an interesting question. So, uh, we didn't touch on what would be happening in the brain in
Oh,
response
please
to
do.
this groove, but it's supposed to be triggering the reward system, the dopamine system, which connects to all the motor regions and connects with the auditory cortex and the cerebellum also for coordination of movements. And so, coming from this dopaminergic brain regions, we understand dopamine as as firing when there are prediction errors, which is when we don't what was it? There's a mismatch between what we expected rhythmically and what we actually heard. So this mismatch between expected rhythms and the rhythms we actually hear is what we call expectation error, prediction error, And neuroscience seems to associate dopamine firing in the brain with the need to resolve this prediction error. Um, the optimal example is with slot machines, where they make you believe that you're going to have something, but you don't, and so every time it just keeps you engaged.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So
So
dopamine. Yeah.
that's a kind of general urge or drive to reduce prediction error,
Mhm.
that's not unique to music. We
Yes.
can find that as a you're familiar with the free energy principle and active inference, but um, it's a thing that organisms are trying to do all the time in every domain of their life, is to reduce this gap between what they expect and the error of what they receive.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Yes. And this gap is in active inference. You can describe this sort of free energy mismatch in all sorts of levels of how the brain and body works. But at least in terms of if we just focus with dopamine, this dopamine molecule does focus a lot has a strong link with movement and motor regions. And so why would we move neuroscientifically to these mismatches? Well, there's one aspect of groove is that it is within a certain tempo. And so tempo is a speed of music, and this is pretty much close to walking tempo. So that's 120 BPM, around that area. So that's one of the explanations for that pattern of tempos in groove. And then one other aspect that could explain why irregularities in rhythms makes us want to move is because our brain when we're trying to expect and predict our brain activity, like electrical activity, mimics the rhythm. So if there's 1, 2, 3, 4, our brain normally is displaying the same rhythm in its activity. And having sort of mismatches might in having a balance between the 1, 2, 3, 4 and the mismatches might want to you want to try and move to correctly to what you're hearing. That's my best attempt to explain
Yeah.
groove
Yeah. So
neuroscientifically.
yeah, it's sort of making me think about the evolutionary advantage of all sorts of ideas are
Mm.
popping up in my mind now about again, which came first, the music or the movement?
Right.
And
Yeah,
in
probably the
is
movement.
everything
Yeah, probably
probably the
movement.
movement.
Oh, in terms of music, dance or music?
Dance or music or there is this many years ago, Dave Stewart and Deepak Chopra produced a song called "Everything Is Music." I don't know if you've heard
I
that.
haven't heard it. No.
And there
Yeah.
was a great animation in it that
Mm.
went with the video, and it sort of showed a cityscape and converted all the buildings into equalizer kind of bars and stuff. It was sort of basically
Ah,
saying that everything is a form of music or pattern.
interesting.
But yeah, sort of I can sort of imagine how evolutionarily there's an advantage to strike this balance between predictability and complexity. So yeah, I guess we want things to be predictable. We want to know where to go for food, um,
Hmm.
but the world doesn't stay the same forever. The world is constantly changing, so we need to be able to, when food runs out or there's a change in the location of food, for example, we need to reduce that error. But we don't want to go exploring to places that are so complex that we're never going to have the chance to reduce the error. So it's sort of set the safe zone of exploring complexity and
Mm.
familiarity or predictability.
And
Uh,
if on that point we can think of flow psychology, which
yes.
has a balance between complexity and simplicity as well. That's one way it's described, but it's in terms of the task that you're doing and the level of skill that you have. So if the task is very complex, but you're very skillful, it might be, I think it's arousing or something like that, or maybe it's flow state. That's probably. I have to look at the chart, but in essence, that's the way the chart is mapped out. I'm not exactly sure where the flow chart is placed. But yeah, okay. So the most I don't know if I should share my screen here or
Yeah, please do.
cool. So the level of skill, if you're very skillful, but the challenge level is very high, that's where flow states arise. Otherwise, depending on your level of skill, you have different emotional responses, but it has to do with a balance between how much you can predict, your skill
Hmm.
level, and the complexity of the task. Where normally high complexity and high skill should be flow states.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
And they can see the boredom there at the bottom where there's not much challenge
Mhm.
and medium level of skill, and you can see why people maybe seek out novelty if they're if
Mhm.
they're not feeling challenged in
Yes.
life through their work, for example.
Mm.
Wow.
Yes. So in in my paper, I did associate flow in groove and music perception, but just linking it to the idea of neural entrainment that we just touched upon, which is the idea that the brain synchronizes with the rhythms of the music. And the reason I've went to that is because flow is usually described as a immersion into the activity. And one importance is in music listening, when you're listening to a song, the more you're focused on the song, the more your brain is synchronized with the acoustic representation of the music. So there are some studies that recreated the music um, from the brain activity uh, and they showed that the more the person was focused, for instance, if they were mind wandering, thinking about something else or not, the music was most similar. So it sounded most similar when you were focused. So here it's a conversion of brain activity into audio. Uh, fr and that brain activity was when they were listening to the music. So they compare the music that was listened to the brain activity turned into audio and see to what extent that was similar. And the focus level was important. And also the familiarity. Yeah.
That's just interesting that you can convert brain activity into music. Is that so? I've seen that's done with like these the latest AI developments of sort of scanning the brain and then trying to predict what the person was thinking and converting it into visual videos. Is that a similar idea?
I think it's a similar idea. I'm not sure if they used AI. Possibly they did use in the pipeline. But yeah, it was I think they converted into two channels or one channel, and then they
Well,
compared to the music, who is also one or two channels, auditory channels. Yeah.
wow. Um, what was I wanted to ask you about that? Oh, it slipped my mind now. That'll
The
come back.
immersion activity or
Oh yeah, so groove and flow. Thank you. So if flow is a if flow can be achieved through lots of activities, would you, other than music, so it can be maybe achieved through a sport or some creative activity or other types of work, would you say that from how you've studied groove and how you've described it, is groove a subset of flow? Is it a type of flow, or are there any subtle differences?
I haven't explored it deeper than what I've just explained, but I would say it's a type of flow. Yeah. It makes sense to
Okay.
describe it like that because it's um it engages synchronization to the music. And what I'm suggesting in this review is that it is um, a great way for different people to be immersed in the music. The urge to move the body um, as a mechanism for that is perceptible through different individuals. You don't need to be familiar with groove to notice the urge to move. Although there's some nuance to this. For instance, contextual aspects. And so, for instance, are you seeing other people move? That will encourage you. Yeah.
Our first person on the dance floor being a catalyst for everyone else to get on the dance floor.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, especially when the song is particularly groovy, then that person will probably,
Ooh,
it'll be
ooh,
more effective than if it's a
slow
less well known
dance.
song, I
Yeah.
guess. Yes, the dance. Yeah. Um, what was I going to ask? Oh, so you touched about lots of different people
Hmm.
joining in with the music, and that sort of could bring us on to the idea of group behavior through music and synchronization, social bonding, and so on. We have had someone on this channel before, called a researcher called Dimitris Zygalitas, who studies ritualistic um, practices and ceremonial practices,
Hmm.
and and how they relate to social bonding and the kind of glue that keeps cultures and communities together. Um, I don't think he doesn't, from what I understand of his work, he doesn't focus so much on music, but there's definitely purposeful, kind of repetitive um, tasks that he talks about. So, could you explain your views on sort of how music, how it might have a purpose in transmitting information or behaviors through generations, or
Mm.
to keep communities together?
I had a listen to your interesting conversation with Dimitris, and yes, I think we can associate musical activities in group to certain ritualistic definitions that he was suggesting, which is repeatedness, because it's a cultural thing, maybe going to the concert could be considered a ritualistic aspect. Um, Now, I remember from his conversation that pain, feeling pain was actually a very bonding experience. The deeper the pain, the more people became altruistic, or something like that. More social bonding. Now, music, the extent to which it could do this maybe is emotional pain, you know,
Ah,
uh, you know, but
yeah.
triggering you emotions that are a bit painful. But the good thing about music is it has this therapeutic aspect, which if you're familiar with the song, gives you a sort of safe space. That's the idea, and so which can help to recontextualize any difficult emotions. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it can be difficult to sort of have this meta awareness on the emotion. But coming to group music, group activity and group music, well, apart from music performances, you can perform in groups, you can have music therapy, a therapist and a client, music education, it's group, music appreciation. And music appreciation is more what I've been focusing on with with this groove review. And um, well, I was just suggesting in this review that groove in music is one musical mechanism for engaging collective synchrony of different individuals by dancing to this pattern of music that gives an urge to move. Um, Now, music more generally as a ritual, um, you know, uh, in sports usually you have anthem, or not only in sports, but anthems are used in a lot
Uh-huh.
of
Yeah.
group activities. And I remember Dimitris mentioned marriages. Marriages tend to have a dancing period, and
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and these aspects which help to bind people in the group is supposed to be because of a relaxation of beliefs. But that mean is a removing any preconceptions about the world, about other people, and music and rituals probably as well, and just in general, allow to remove preconceptions so that you're more open to speaking or embracing other people.
Mm, yeah. So it's, some people think they have to have or many people enjoy having a alcoholic drink before they dance,
Right,
um, to kind of remove their social inhibitions. But what you're saying is the music itself can do that, and
right.
dance perhaps can have that effect.
I can do that. I did look, I put together sort of hypothetical, um, some contextual factors that contribute to danceability. I kind of share my screen right now. I would think it'll be easier for people to have a look at it.
So
But
danceability, is this Spotify's
right,
metric?
well, I used the word danceability for just wanting to dance.
Okay.
But yes, not Spotify's, which I can touch on later. But here's just a different. I call these sort of layers that you have to go through to be able to start to synchronize and connect to the groove. There are
Uh,
many aspects that groove or some other people. For instance, self-doubt, or
uh-huh.
if you might need to see other people, you might need to overcome self-doubt, you might need to hear familiarity of the music, you might just need to hear certain, musical aspects that are, rhythms that you're familiar with, not necessarily the whole song that you're familiar. Here's more like, oh, I know this Michael Jackson song. Here's more like, oh, I know this tum 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 tum. I've heard this before.
Yeah.
Here's you might need to have an emotional journey. I think I put this one because I spoke to a DJ who says that to help people go to the dance floor, you tend to have an increase in energy, so that's in the
Uh,
music, so that people start to get more, upbeat. So
yes.
this is the emotional journey. Expressivity, I think this, how did I define this? Uh, Maybe the need to just express, you maybe
Okay.
you just need to move that you
Yep. Something
yeah.
something needs to be released. Yeah.
Yes. So this is just a hypothesis of how maybe you just
Okay.
need one, maybe you need to go through the several of those, but there are definitely aspects that contribute to.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, you've got the self-doubt in there, and
Mhm.
you mentioned earlier about music can be a safe space to yeah to sample emotions, or to work through them or process them.
Mm.
It's reminded me of another researcher in the active inference community, who's looked at the um, horror movies and why they are so appealing, especially to teenagers. And his
Oh,
idea is that it's yeah, it can be, it is like a safe space to um, calibrate your emotions, um,
right.
and
Yeah.
to play with fear. And I guess with music, we play with all kinds. We can play with all kinds of emotions.
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting. I
Fine.
like that.
Um, I would like to, before we're sort of coming up to 10 to the hour, um, can we speak a little bit about the therapeutic applications that you and your colleagues at the Centre for Music Therapy
Mhm.
um, are working on?
Sure. So I do have to clarify that my PhD focus is not on groove, it's on sleep
Right,
music.
right, fine.
Yes, and so that's one of them. Music to go to sleep faster, falling asleep faster. I'm focusing on caregivers of dementia.
Hmm.
So these are a population who have a low influence on their caregiving moments, when they're living with the person who has dementia. Maybe the person wakes up in the middle of the night and they have to, help out with care needs then. Um, Now, sleep music, that's one aspect. So, I am looking at sort of features that allow you to be a lower arousal music. And it's very popular on Spotify and YouTube. A lot of sleep music is available there.
Can you maybe give some tips for people? Have you found any that are more effective than others? What would be the best go-to places for
Yeah.
music to help us sleep?
Um,
What you've seen, or if you've not got it to hand, we can I can put some maybe
sure,
some
I could
suggestions
send some.
later.
I can send some stuff. I have my own playlist. There's a very personal aspect, that has to be. Personalization is important for the sleep music, and
Mm.
I have my own Spotify playlist that works.
Mm.
I can send that one as well. There are sleep meditations, so that's with a voice on top that they do hypnosis. Um, I can find the name for that one and send it to you. Again, there's an Australian guy who uses that, and apparently there's a woman who also does that. I was recommended. But in terms of music, there is Max Richter, which is quite known. He's done a
Oh, he's got a sleep one.
sleep album. Yeah.
I've heard some of his compositions, and they're
Mm,
really beautiful. But I didn't know he's got some specifically for sleep. That's good.
yeah. But in essence, it is what you would call soothing music. Very ideally slow, no changes in volume, no percussion, ideally, repetitive rhythm. So I'll send some resources for viewers to have a look at.
Thank you. So yeah, your PhD focusing on sleep and carers of people with Alzheimer's,
Mhm.
and where do you see the future of research in this area heading? Are there any is AI or any technological advances going to help accelerate research into music therapy? Would you say?
Sure. So AI will probably help. The way that's being discussed between my colleagues is as a either as is before the therapy. So maybe as a chat box, maybe you can help to choose which type of therapy is best, or um, using it as a recommender system when you are, sort of a AI Spotify that's therapeutic. That could be one thing in between music therapy sessions, or an AI that understands your therapeutic needs, so it plays the music that that would be the most beneficial. I see that AI will be very important. Um, and I don't see any particular AI applications yet in music therapy. There's potential for that. And the future of research, I didn't mention what other colleagues do at CIMTR, but there's work with autism, work so in schools, how music therapy can help improve their educational success, and there is eating disorders. There's working in ICU as well, how music can be used to soothe an anxiety and pain in the context of surgery, before, during, after. Um, and with dementia, that's the main goal at CIMTR, which is trying to reduce symptoms, behavioral symptoms, with the one that's called agitation, which is tends to be verbal or physical aggression, for instance, or it can be confusion. So how can music reduce those moments of you know behavioral agitation?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Wow. So plenty to keep an eye out
Yeah.
for. I'm going to put a link to the Centre for the
The Cambridge
Cambridge
Institute
Institute for
for
Music
Music
Therapy
Therapy
in the
Research.
notes
Yeah.
here. And
Yeah.
your YouTube channel as well. Can you please tell us a little bit about your channel, the themes of your
Sure.
channel, and the name of the channel?
So Music Minded, where I had the honor to have you, Ian, talk about DNA, inflammation, and life interventions based on your book, which I really liked and I recommend.
Thank you.
So Music Minded is a YouTube channel where I explore different aspects of music science, music philosophy, and arts as well. And I started a podcast recently where I had you and I had a music therapist come over and discuss about listening attentively and how that can be helpful for therapy. And there's an art curator who is very interested in how art can be used for well-being. There's an anesthetist that's very interested in how music can be used in the ICU setting. And yeah, other videos on anything that has to do with music and science and philosophy.
Great, plenty of resources for people to check out. And
Mhm.
other than those channels, are there any other places that people can find out about your work?
Sure. My Spotify, I put my music there, and they can have a listen to what I put there. I try to put music often, frequently, so I have about 50 tracks there. So I'll put a link. I'll send a link for that.
Have you
And
got any gigs coming up with for your own
I
music?
today I have a rehearsal with a collaborator who's a very talented pianist. He plays at the V&A Museum as a jazz pianist, and we're working on a electroacoustic project where he would be improvising on the piano. I'll be on the electronic part and maybe the bass. Um, I think that's the next project that I'll do live. We haven't set a concert date yet, but that's coming.
Uh, I'll keep my eyes peeled for that.
Yeah, I'll send an invitation.
Fantastic. Okay, so just before we finish, any final words or comments or things you want to share before we wrap up?
Hmm. Um, yeah, I feel that listening to music is a very powerful tool for uplifting your mood. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes I don't put on my headphones, and until I put my headphones, I just see my world be enhanced, you know. And that probably the more you're attuned with music, the more it will affect you. And in that sense, if you don't listen to music, you probably don't get that effects. But I think it's a good thing to keep in mind. Have your music, maybe a bit of music in the morning, bit of music spread out throughout the day, could really uplift your mood in a way that you don't know until you do it. So
That's
yeah,
a great reminder. Thank you. I used to back in the day when I had an iPod. Were they called iPods? Those little
yes,
tiny ones.
yeah.
I used to almost feel like it was an appendage to my body, that it was constantly with me. But these days, when I have my headphones on, it's often something more informational rather than music. So you've inspired me to um, kind of sprinkle my day with more music.
Yeah, it can be just one or two songs, and then you go to your podcast stuff and information stuff. Yeah,
Thank you,
great.
Leonardo. Really
Thank you
enjoyed
so
that,
much.
and hopefully we can speak again sometime in this year.
Sounds great. Would love that. Thank you so much.